Mr. Speaker, I think most people in this country are aware that we're going through a very serious pandemic in which rates of infection have been steadily brought down thanks to the efforts of the rich people. I think also members of this House are familiar with the notion that in just a few days we will be setting out a roadmap for the way out of this pandemic, a roadmap that I hope the Right Honourable Gentleman and his colleagues will support. Though the support, as we know, tends to be a transitory thing, Mr. Speaker. One week we have it, the next week we don't. But he won't have to contain himself for very long.
Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, let me let the Prime Minister into a secret. He can take decisions for himself, and he doesn't need to leave everything to the 11th minute. If I were Prime Minister, I'd say to businesses, we'll support you now, we'll protect jobs now. Because the CBI, the Federation of Small Businesses, the Institute of Directors and the British Chamber of Commerce have all said the same thing. They all say, Prime Minister, they can't wait until the budget. The Prime Minister may disagree with me, but he's actually disagreeing with businesses. Why does the Prime Minister think he knows better than British business?
Mr. Speaker, I think that most business people that I've talked to a great many in the last 12 months, would agree that there is no government around the world that has done more to support business, wrapping our arms around business. And actually, I'm delighted to hear this enthusiasm for business from the Labour Party when they stood on a manifesto to destroy capitalism at the last election, and indeed to dismantle the very pharmaceutical industry, Mr. Speaker, that has provided the vaccines on which we now rely. Will he now repudiate that policy, Mr. Speaker?
Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, we all know what the Prime Minister once said he wanted to do to business. We on these benches would rather listen to businesses. So we've no decision on business rates, no decision on furlough. Let's try another crucial issue. And Prime Minister, no excuse for delaying this time, because this has to be decided before the March budget, and the Prime Minister doesn't need to check with the Chancellor. So will the Prime Minister now commit to extending the evictions ban on residential properties beyond February the 21st?
Mr. Speaker, I've said repeatedly that what we will do in this government and throughout this pandemic is put our arms around the British people, support them throughout the pandemic, and make sure that people are not unfairly evicted during the pandemic. That is what we will do. What I hope very much, Mr. Speaker, is that we may hear from the Right Honourable Gentleman opposite that he not only has now had a Damascene conversion to the importance of business, but a Damascene conversion to supporting all the government's policies to support business, rather than sniping from the sidelines. Why doesn't he just get behind us and back the government, back us in our efforts to back business and back the British people?
Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, I'm not going to take lectures from a man who wrote 2 versions of every column he ever wrote as a journalist, who proposed Donald Trump for a Nobel Peace Prize and gave Dominic Cummings a pay rise. Back to the question. Another area where the Prime Minister repeatedly delayed and now changes policy pretty well every day is securing our borders against variants of COVID. Every week the Prime Minister comes here and says we've got one of the toughest regimes in the world. We know his Home Secretary disagrees with him. We know the Health Secretary disagrees with him. Luckily, Mr. Speaker, Oxford University keep track of how tough border restrictions are in every country. They say that there are at least 33 countries around the world which currently have tougher restrictions for the United Kingdom. 33, Prime Minister, including Canada, Denmark, Japan, Israel. There are many others. In fact, they say we're not even in the top bracket of countries for border restrictions. 50 days after we first discovered the South African variant, 50 days. How does the Prime Minister explain that?
Mr. Speaker, there is Thank you. Mr. Speaker, there are some countries in Europe that do not even have a hotel quarantine scheme such as the one we're putting in on Monday. We have amongst the toughest border regimes anywhere in the world. And people should understand that on a normal day, Mr. Speaker, at this time of year, you could expect about 250,000 people to be arriving in this country. We've got it down to about 20,000, 5,000 of them whom are involved in bringing vital things into this country, such as medicines and food, as we discussed last week, and he agreed that was a good idea, Mr. Speaker. Unless he actually wants to cut this country off from the rest of the world, which I think last week he said he didn't want to do, unless, of course, he's changed his mind again, Mr. Speaker. I think that this policy is measured, it is proportionate, it is getting tougher from Monday. I hope that he supports it.
Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, the truth is this. The Prime Minister is failing to give security to British businesses, and he's failing to secure our borders. The Prime Minister often complains that we never put forward constructive proposals, so here's two for him. Support businesses and protect jobs now by extending furlough, business rate relief and VAT cuts for hospitality. And second, secure our borders with a comprehensive hotel quarantine on arrival. No more delays. Will he do it?
Mr. Speaker, we've just announced the quarantine policy, which, as I've said to the House, is amongst the toughest in the world and tougher than most other European countries, certainly. I'm delighted that he's now supporting business in his latest stunt of bandwagoneering, not a policy for which he was famous before, Mr. Speaker. But he moves from one side of the other in the debate throughout this crisis. And some people, Mr. Speaker, some people have said that this is a good crisis, Mr. Speaker. Some people have said this is a good crisis. Some people have said that this crisis is a gift that keeps on giving, Mr. Crisis. Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, those people sit on the Labour front bench. I think it is disgraceful that they should say those things. I believe this is one of the biggest challenges this country has faced since the Second World War. And thanks to one of the fastest vaccine rollouts anywhere in the world, I believe it is a challenge this country can meet and is meeting. And I believe that of that vaccine rollout programme, this House and this country should be very proud.
Julian Smith.
Speaker, can I thank the Prime Minister for the decisions he